So people often ask me, why did you become a doctor? I look back and my answer is always the same. I love science. I always have, I always will. But one thing I didn't love about science is the scientific lecture. During my 25 years of education and training, I have suffered through literally hundreds and hundreds of bad science lectures. Lectures have had a monopoly, not just in science, but in all forms of education. The lecture has been around a long time. Universities first appeared in Western Europe in 1050, and lecturing has been the predominant form of teaching ever since. So think about that. By far the most common tool to communicate and educate about science has not really changed in just about 1,000 years. Now, some lectures are okay, but many aren't. Why do people keep going to and listening to lectures if most of the time they're unending, disorganized, overstuffed with facts, overly complex, and basically interminably boring? This is really a frustrating paradox, isn't it? And make no mistake about it, boredom kills. Boredom kills attention. It kills effective communication. It kills the opportunity to differentiate your message from the thousands of others your audience is also listening to. Most importantly, boredom kills excitement because you can't be bored and excited at the same time. And without exciting our audiences, there's very little chance of opening their minds. Because a bored mind is a closed mind. So let's look really hard at the lecture and ask an even more important question. What is a more powerful alternative to the flat, boring lecture? The answer, in a word, is story. Our first big word of the day. Now, I'm not talking about story in the sense of a personal anecdote or memory, the kind of story where I share something that really happened to me. Sharing stories like that is great. It's fine. It can be an intimate way to connect with my audience. But that's not what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about using story as a communication technology. I'm talking about using story to communicate hard, complex, unfamiliar scientific ideas. I'm talking about the big story that you want to tell about a specific disease or condition that people don't understand, about a new drug that is revolutionizing medical care, about an existing compound that is unappreciated and underutilized, about a new diagnostic test that greatly improves medical care, about any medical product that needs to be scientifically differentiated from its competitors. So what makes a story different than a lecture? And how do you go about building a scientific story? Where do you start? And how do you end in a way that your audience experiences a powerful story rather than suffering through a cruel lecture? So here comes the second big word of the day. Tension. Stories have tension. They must have tension. Otherwise, they are not really stories. Think about the thousands of stories that you've seen or heard in your life. The movies, the books, the songs, the jokes. Jokes are all stories. And what made them stories is that tension was created and then resolved. In fact, for a really powerful story that engages audiences for 5, 10, 20, 30, or 40 minutes, you're going to need to create tension over and over and over again. We call these story tension points. Those story tension points need to be sequenced so that as each one is resolved, it's naturally smoothly followed by the next tension point. Tension, resolution, tension, resolution. Now you might think that people only enjoy the resolution part, but you'd only be half right. People actually enjoy both the tension generation and the resolution. What people don't enjoy is the typical flat lecture that has no tension and so no resolution either. So what is this stringing of tension and resolution points called? We call it story flow. So I've talked about story tension and story flow being critical to telling a great story. But there's another element that's absolutely critical, because without it, a potentially great story will fall just as flat as any lecture. You need a North Star, a big idea, a final singular destination for your story. You need, in other words, what we call a core story concept. It's the moral of the story. It's what people will remember and carry with them and share with their friends and with their family and hopefully with their colleagues as well. It needs to be clear and simple, but have sufficient detail to stand on its own credibly. And it's critical that that core story concept be clearly visualized, because visual memory is extremely powerful, and because visual images touch people's emotions. Now, what's the link between story flow and the core story concept? Well, the story flow is the path, that journey that you take your audience on. And that journey ends at the core story concept, where the audience accepts and believes your core story concept because you just took them on a very compelling, very enjoyable trip that persuaded them that this big idea is based in fact, is credible. But even more importantly, that this core story concept is genuinely exciting. So let me summarize by giving you the core story concept of this story. The flat scientific lecture is a chronic disease that has ravaged medical education for many, many years. Story is the antidote to that disease. Why does it work so well? Story works because human beings are hardwired to learn through stories. It works because people like seeing and hearing stories. It works because people remember stories much better than they remember facts. The first key to making a great scientific story is having the entire story revolve around and support a single powerful core story concept. The second key is to create story flow that produces psychological tension in your audience over and over. Tension that people enjoy having. Making all that happen takes a lot of work and time and effort. But when it's done right, a powerful science story does what the flat lecture does not do and really can never do. Touch people and enlighten them and empower them to remember and to share what they've learned. Thank you for listening.